Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. On Tuesday we finally received the winter patch for Battlefield 4, which brought quite a few cool changes from the CTE to retail. Now, a few of you asked me on Twitter and Facebook if I could do a video that explains all the changes that were included in that patch. And I've been thinking about doing that, but I came to the conclusion that I already did videos about pretty much everything that is included in this patch. Like the improved soldier collision model, the crosshair customization and a lot of other things. Some of the changes I even showed you before they were added in the community test environment, like the new helicopter physics. So I felt that if I were to do a video that explains all the changes of that patch, then I would basically just recycle the videos that I already released, and that feels kind of cheap. On top of that, that video would be pretty long, because I do like to explain the changes in detail to make sure that everyone who watches the video really understands what the change is about and how it works, especially the complex ones like the netcode changes. You just cannot squeeze all the changes into a 10-minute video and properly explain everything. Even some of the popular YouTubers did a poor or flat out wrong description of the netcode changes in their videos, and this is really very bad because there are still a lot of misconceptions in the community about how the netcode is working, and these videos don't help. So I know that I might sound arrogant, but if you want to know how the netcode works now after the winter patch, then you should really watch my Netcode Demystified video, which describes it in great detail, and all the info there is based on an insane amount of tests and conversations that I had with the developers who worked on these changes. In my opinion, it is very important that the players know how the netcode works and know about the flaws it still has, because only then they are able to give valuable feedback that will help the developers to improve it even further. Which brings us to the real topic of this video, the new netcode changes that were released in the community test environment. So when we have a look at the changelog, then a few of them sound a little bit cryptic, like the reduced impact of rubber banding and improved messaging. What this means is that the system is now able to track a stall of the server better and then handle these stalls more gracefully, which should reduce the rubber banding that you see happening on your screen. So basically this just means less rubber banding. Then there is a change for players who have a poor internet connection. This should now have a smoother experience, which means that the movement of soldiers and vehicles is smoother and won't stutter as much as it did before. The next entry in the changelog is very exciting. The network smoothing option has been removed. I still remember when this feature has been introduced, and back then I thought that this can only be a temporary solution to the issue that we had, which was that the fixed smoothing value caused an additional delay. I did expect that a few months later DICE Stockholm would come up with an automated solution for this smoothing and remove that slider again, but sadly it even followed us into Battlefield 4, where it continued to confuse the players because they didn't know which value they should choose. I have once done a very detailed video that explained the effects of the network smoothing, which is now obsolete, but if you want to watch it, then you will see why this slider was bad and why I'm so happy that this new solution from DICE LA no longer needs that config option. If you're now worried that this new function will increase the delay, then let me assure you that I will do a lot of tests during the next weeks to find out if the delay is the same, less or more than what we had with the network smoothing set to 0. Then they included the hit indicator into the high frequency network update. This means that from now on the hit indicator will receive updates at the highest possible rate. It looks like previously it only received updates 10 times per second, or not always at the highest possible rate. So now that this has been changed, the hit indicator should appear quicker and the game should feel more responsive. And they moved all the networking options to a new section inside the advanced gameplay options. Actually they went all the way down in that section, but that is fine because you don't have a reason to go there anymore, as there is no option there that you actually want or need to change. Now, what are the most infuriating issues that we face in the game? In my opinion, it is the collecting of damage, which means that you receive the damage of multiple hits in one frame, rather than receiving the damage individually as the shots were fired, and that can lead to an one-frame death. This primarily happens when the shooter is suffering from outbound packet loss, but it also happens with the first burst of fired rounds, even when the player does not have any packet loss. This issue has been worked on, but there are still no details about the progress that has hopefully been made by now. Another issue is that you take damage around cover. This means that you decide to crouch behind a solid object, and even though you're perfectly hidden behind that object, you still receive damage from another player as if you were still standing. Or you run around the corner of a building, but the bullets seem to follow you around it. And that is something that has also been worked on in this patch in the CTE, because according to the changelog, the time that it takes the netcode to update the players with your stance change, like when you decide to crouch behind a solid object, has been reduced. Now let's find out if this is really true. Here we have two players. On the left is player 1 and on the right is player 2. Both have a ping of 25 milliseconds to the server, no packet loss and a low packet queue. The servers I tested this on were empty and had just been restarted. But wait, why am I testing this on empty servers? That's unrealistic and won't provide conclusive test results. I have to test this on a full 64-player server. At least that's what I hear from people when I do that kind of tests. The reason why I do these tests in a controlled environment or a best case scenario is that if I cannot measure any improvement in this setup, then there won't be an improvement on a full server either. So these tests are about proving that the change does something, and if it doesn't, then this basically means that the change goes back to the drawing board. The second reason is that you can't perform these tests on a full server, because I have tried and there will always be some random idiot who will join on you, run around like a headless chicken and kill one of the players involved in the test. So I can prove if a change is working or not, but the real life testing, that has to be done while playing the game, and that is why your feedback is so important. So what do we test here? Player 1 will change his stance, and I will measure the time it takes between starting the stance change in the view of player 1 and the player model in the view of player 2 to update and start the animation. I capture this in 1080p at 60 frames per second, and I repeat this test 20 times in the hipfire position, and then I take the average value from these 20 tests. I then repeat this test when the player is aiming down his sight. The result shows us that in the retail version of Battlefield 4 we have a delay of 6 frames or 100 milliseconds until player 2 sees that player 1 starts to crouch when he is in hipfire. When he's aiming down sight, then we have a delay of 8 frames or 133 milliseconds. If you repeat this test in the CTE, which has the new netcode changes, then the delay is 4 frames or 66 milliseconds when he is in hipfire, or 5 frames when he's aiming down sight. This means that we have a reduction of 33 milliseconds when he is in hipfire and 50 milliseconds when he's aiming down sight. Now, these numbers might not sound like much, but what is important to understand is that the issues the netcode is suffering from, or lets us suffer from, cannot be fixed by just touching one part of the code. It is about reducing the delay by a few milliseconds here, some more here and there. And when all these changes come together, then these will eventually fix the problems and the bad experience that we have in the game. So this reduction might not look like much, but in the end it will play a big part in fixing the issue of getting hit around cover. But this delay reduction is not the only change that was done to reduce the issue of taking damage behind cover. The developers also reduced the maximum extrapolation time for soldiers. Now, what the hell does this mean? The game is constantly trying to predict or extrapolate what players do next. The server sort of lives in the future. The more distant the future is that it wants to look into, the less accurate the prediction will be. Once the game receives an update with what the players actually did, this prediction gets updated or corrected. So with the reduction of the extrapolation time, the cases where a 200 milliseconds player is able to inflict damage on a low ping player that already went around the corner of a building should now improve significantly, as the correction that happens will negate damage in bad situations. So I tried to test this in my controlled environment by artificially increasing the latency of one of the players by 200 milliseconds. And I think that I noticed an improvement, but testing this alone is pretty hard, so I don't have any numbers for you at this time, and I'm not 100% certain that there is an improvement. The best test is to jump on a CTE server and play against high ping players, and then report your experience to the developers in the CTE subreddit or the forum. Now, while I did these tests, I noticed something about the animation when you change your stance. In the first person perspective, it does not matter if you are in hipfire or aiming down sight. After 18 frames or 300 milliseconds, the crosshair reaches the end position, which gives you the impression that you are now completely hidden behind the object. If another player is looking at you while you do that in hipfire, then it takes your player model 16 frames or 266 milliseconds until your head reaches the lowest point in that animation. If you do the same while you aim down sight, then it takes your player model 26 frames or 433 milliseconds until your head reaches the lowest point in that animation, and that point is not as low when you aim down sight. So from your perspective, you are under the impression that after 300 milliseconds you are hidden behind the object. But if you perform that action while you are aiming down sight, then all the other players on the server will see your head for another 133 milliseconds, because that animation takes longer to complete. So what we have here is a mismatch in the animation between first and third person, and you can surely see how that could be responsible for getting the feeling of taking damage behind cover. So if you plan to peek out behind cover, then you should consider to not do that while aiming down sight. At least not at the moment, because I already gave all those test results to the developers and designers at DICE, and this animation issue should be fairly easy to fix. I think that these changes show that DICE is not yet done with the game and the netcode. And I also got the feeling that it will not just be Battlefield 4 and Hardline which benefit from these changes. I think they try to set up the netcode to be used in many future games to come, and that is clearly a good thing if that is the case, because this means that the netcode development has much more resources. And that will hopefully bring us flexible tick rates and update rates beyond the 30 Hz mark at some point in the future. So join the CTE servers, test the changes and provide feedback in the forums or the CTE subreddit. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a like, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris and this was Battle Nonsense.